The ocean is vast, mysterious, and terrifying. Beneath the surface lie secrets mankind was never meant to uncover. Tonight, we bring you chilling stories from the deep, stories of warnings, disappearances, and horrors that defy explanation. But before we dive in, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel, Dr. Macabre. It helps us bring you more terrifying tales from the unknown. The ocean is a place of secrets, some meant to be discovered, others meant to stay buried. But what happens when the deep decides to speak? Our first story isn't just about a strange transmission, it's about a warning, one we might have been too late to understand. This is the abyssal signal. Do you really think we're alone down here? The question hung in the stale air of the control room, barely louder than the hum of the research vessel's instruments. Dr. Nathan Carter didn't respond right away. He just stared at the monitor, his breath slow and measured, his fingers twitching over the console. The signal had returned, stronger this time, clearer. It wasn't random oceanic noise. It wasn't interference. Someone was transmitting from the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Nathan wasn't the type to scare easily. He had spent the last 15 years of his life mapping the unmapped, descending into places where sunlight was nothing but a memory. A deep-sea explorer, a scientist, a man obsessed with what lurked beneath. His colleagues called him relentless. His ex-wife had called him insufferable. He supposed both were true. He was a man who did not let go of questions until he had answers, no matter how much sleep, sanity, or relationships it cost him. And now, sitting in the control room of the Nereid, floating miles above the deepest abyss on Earth, he was closer than ever to an answer. A signal. Recurring. Undeniable. And worse, it sounded like a warning. The first time they detected it was 2 nights ago. It was faint, barely distinguishable from the usual background noise of the deep, shifts in the water column, distant whale calls, the groan of the trench's walls adjusting under crushing pressure. At first, Nathan assumed it was just another anomaly. The ocean had a way of playing tricks on the mind. Strange acoustics, pressure waves, phenomena that had fooled even the most seasoned oceanographers. But then it happened again and again, the same sequence, a pattern. 3 bursts of sound, a pause, 2 longer tones, another pause, then a final, drawn-out wail, like something ancient exhaling its last breath. It wasn't natural. Nathan had run the recording through every decryption algorithm they had on board. Sonar interference? No. Military transmissions? Negative. A new species of deep-sea life? Unlikely. That left one last possibility, the one he didn't want to consider. Someone, or something, was sending it. Nathan's fingers hovered over the playback button. "You sure you want to hear it again?" a voice asked behind him. Dr. Olivia Harding, the ship's acoustics specialist. Young, brilliant, but wary. Unlike Nathan, she still believed some doors were meant to stay closed. He pressed play. The signal filled the small control room, deep and resonant. It didn't sound like a distress call. Not exactly. More like a warning. Low, deliberate, pulsing with something that almost felt alive. Olivia exhaled sharply. "Jesus. It's clearer now?" Nathan nodded. "It's getting closer." A silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken fears. "We should report this to the surface," Olivia said. Nathan shook his head. "No, not yet." She frowned. "What do you mean, not yet? We don't know what this is. Hell, we don't even know if it's safe." "That's exactly why we need to go deeper." She stared at him. "You're serious?" Nathan leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. Every great discovery starts with uncertainty. We're scientists, Olivia. We don't run from the unknown. We chase it. She let out a humorless laugh. Yeah, and sometimes we don't come back. Nathan didn't argue. He just turned back to the console and stared at the screen where the signal still pulsed like a heartbeat. Something was waiting down there, and it wanted to be heard. The Bathysphere 4 was their submersible, a titanium sphere reinforced for the abyss, capable of withstanding pressures that would turn a human body into pulp in seconds. Nathan had spent more time inside it than he had in his own apartment. As he and Olivia strapped in, the dive team ran through the final checks. The sub's robotic arms twitched, the floodlights flickered, illuminating the black maw of the trench below. Nathan exhaled. Ready? Olivia hesitated. Then, reluctantly, she nodded. The clamps released. The sub dropped into darkness. At first, the descent was smooth. The surface light faded fast, replaced by the eerie glow of the sub's floodlights. Tiny bioluminescent creatures flickered past like dying stars. The water grew heavier, pressing, squeezing. Then at 26,000 feet, the first malfunction occurred. A flicker on the control panel, a static crackle in their comms. Nathan tapped the console. We just lost external sonar. Olivia checked her display. Still have cameras, but something's messing with our signal. Interference? Maybe. Or thud. The sub lurched. A deep, reverberating impact, like something enormous had just shifted in the water beside them. Olivia's breath hitched. What the hell was that? Nathan activated the side cameras. The screen showed only darkness, endless, pressing, watching. Another thud, closer this time. Then, the signal returned, louder, and for the first time, clear. It wasn't random noise anymore. It wasn't just a pattern, it was words. A voice, deep, guttural, layered, as if spoken by something that had never needed lungs to breathe, reverberated through the sub's speakers. You should not be here. Olivia's hands flew to her headset. Did you hear that? Nathan swallowed hard. His fingers clenched around the controls. This wasn't possible. Nothing should have been able to speak at these depths. No human, no known creature. And yet, the voice came again, resonating through the very structure of the sub, rattling the bolts and seams. Leave now. Nathan's pulse pounded. Every instinct told him to surface, to run. But another part of him, the part that had spent years chasing the impossible, refused to turn back. He reached for the controls, pushing the sub deeper. Are you insane? Olivia shouted. It just warned us. And I need to know why. The abyss below gaped wider. The water grew darker, thicker, almost as if something down there was waiting. Then, the floodlights flickered. A shape moved in the darkness. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. Something massive, something that should not exist. The voice came again, this time a whisper inside their heads. Too late. The sub stopped moving, not by choice. Something had grabbed them. The walls groaned, the lights died. And in the pitch-black silence, Nathan finally understood. The signal wasn't a warning for them. It was a warning for everything else. Because now, it had found them. The ocean doesn't just whisper, it takes. Dr. Nathan Carter and his team followed the signal into the abyss. But they weren't the only ones to receive a warning. Just days later, another vessel drifted above the Mariana Trench, unaware that something had already marked them. And this time, it wasn't just a message, it was a disappearance. The signal was just the beginning, a whisper from the deep. But what happens when those whispers become silence? That's the end of this story. But the next one takes us aboard a doomed ship, a vessel whose crew simply vanished without a trace. Get ready for the chilling tale of the vanishing crew. The distress call came at exactly 3:17 a.m., a garbled transmission, static-laced, barely intelligible. The voice on the other end? Desperate, panicked, screaming. Then, silence. The research vessel Trident had been floating above the Mariana Trench for over a week, running deep-sea mapping operations. The mission was standard, routine. But what happened next, what Captain Elias Mercer witnessed with his own eyes, would never leave him. Because 30 minutes after that distress call, the Nereid disappeared. Mercer had been at sea for 20 years. A former Navy officer turned expedition leader, he was the kind of man who trusted facts over feelings. He had seen his fair share of dangers, rogue waves, engine failures, equipment malfunctions, but he had never seen an entire submersible vanish without a trace. And now he was left staring at a sonar screen that showed nothing but the abyss. The Nereid was gone, no debris, no wreckage, just emptiness. "Run the signal again," Mercer ordered. A technician hesitated before replaying the last transmission. The speakers crackled. At first, nothing but white noise. Then, Nathan Carter's voice, warped, distorted. "We found something. It's static." Then Olivia Harding's voice, raw with terror, "It's not letting us go." The rest was drowned in a sound that should not have existed, a deep, resonant rumble, a noise that felt alive. Then, nothing. The control room was silent. Nobody moved. Mercer exhaled slowly. He could feel the eyes of his crew on him, waiting for orders. They were scientists, engineers, people who believed in data and logic. But there was no logic to what just happened. No explanation. "Sir," one of the younger crew members finally spoke. "What do we do?" Mercer didn't answer right away. His mind was calculating, weighing possibilities. The sensible thing? Declare the Nereid lost. Report it. Wait for backup. But Mercer knew, if they waited, they would never find out what happened. He turned to the technician. "Prep the second submersible." Murmurs of unease rippled through the room. "You want to send another crew down there?" someone asked. Mercer's jaw tensed. "Not a crew." He stepped toward the display, eyes locked on the trench. "I'm going down there myself." The Trident had one more submersible, the Bathysphere V. Identical to the Nereid, reinforced titanium walls, external cameras, floodlights, and robotic arms designed for deep-sea exploration. But this time, Mercer wasn't just exploring. He was looking for answers, and he was going alone. As the Bathysphere V was lowered into the abyss, Mercer steadied his breathing. The descent was slow, the water outside growing darker, heavier. His hands tightened around the controls. 26,000 feet. This was where the Nereid had last been recorded. Mercer activated the sonar. Nothing, not even background interference. It was like the ocean itself had swallowed the missing sub. 30,000 feet. The floodlights barely cut through the darkness now. The trench walls loomed like towering cathedrals, ancient and unknowable. Mercer's radio crackled, a faint sound almost like breathing. He stiffened. "Trident, do you read me?" Silence. Then, a thud. From below, Mercer's pulse spiked. His fingers hovered over the emergency ascent controls. Something was down here, and it was moving. The sonar pinged. A shape just beyond the edge of the floodlights. Mercer adjusted the cameras, narrowing in. Then he saw it. The Nereid, or what was left of it. The sub rested on the trench floor at an impossible angle. Its hull was twisted, warped as if something had crushed it like an aluminum can. The metal wasn't just dented, it was scarred. Deep, jagged claw marks ran along its surface. Mercer's throat went dry. Nothing in the ocean, nothing natural, could have done this. He switched to infrared, heat signatures. His blood ran cold. There were still signs of life inside. Mercer activated the sub's external speaker. "This is Captain Mercer of the Trident. Do you read me?" A moment of silence. Then a sound, not words, not a voice, but something else. A low, guttural whisper vibrating through the water. Mercer's skin prickled. He switched to the emergency channel. "Dr. Carter? Harding? Anyone?" Silence. Then from the darkness of the Nereid's shattered viewport, a hand, a human hand, pale and trembling, reached out from the wreckage. Mercer's breath caught. Someone was alive. But before he could react, the hand was yanked back. Fast, violent. And then came the scream. A sound not meant for human ears. Something ancient, something hungry. And it was right behind him. The crew was gone, but their absence left behind questions no one dared to answer. Now imagine being the one who hears the last voice before it fades forever. That's the end of this tale, but the next story will haunt you with the echo of the last transmission. There are things in the ocean older than time, things that were here before the first fish grew legs, before the first creatures crawled onto land. They do not belong to history, because history implies they are gone. They are not. And Dr. Samantha Holloway just made contact. Samantha was the Trident's lead marine biologist. Sharp, methodical, the kind of woman who didn't just observe the deep, she understood it. She had spent years studying bioluminescence, abyssal ecosystems, the silent wars between predator and prey in the blackest waters on Earth. But none of her research prepared her for what was hunting them now. She stared at the sonar screen, fingers tight around the edge of the console. The Bathysphere V Mercer's sub was still transmitting. Barely. The feed was distorted, filled with bursts of static. But between the interference, she heard breathing. Not Mercer's, something else. Samantha turned to the crew. "Can we boost the signal?" The radio technician, Lyle Grant, shook his head. He was younger, maybe 25, but already sweating through his uniform. "We're trying. It's not just interference. It's like something's blocking it." Samantha swallowed. That wasn't possible. Nothing blocked deep-sea signals unless it was deliberate. She turned back to the audio feed, and that's when she heard it. A voice, but not Mercer's. Something low, layered. "You should not be here." Samantha's heart slammed against her ribs. "Pull him up." Lyle hesitated. "What if?" I said pull him up. Now. Mercer was alive, for now. Inside the Bathysphere V, he gripped the controls, eyes darting between the ruined wreck of the Nereid and the thing moving outside his floodlights. His breathing was shallow, controlled. He'd been in combat situations before. He knew how to push fear down. But this wasn't a firefight. This wasn't human. Something massive was shifting in the dark, not swimming, crawling. The sonar pulsed. The shape circled, too large to be measured, too long. Mercer's fingers hovered over the emergency ascent. He should leave. Now. But then, he saw the hand again, pressing against the Nereid's viewport. Someone was still inside. Mercer made a choice. He activated the sub's robotic arm, extending it toward the shattered Nereid. If there was a survivor, he wasn't leaving them behind. The metal claw latched onto the wreck. He activated the external speaker. "This is Captain Elias Mercer. If you can hear me, move toward the exit. I'm getting you out." Silence. Then, movement. A figure, thin, trembling, crawled out of the wreckage. A woman. Dr. Olivia Harding. Her face was pale, her suit torn. But her eyes, something was wrong with her eyes. Mercer wasted no time. He maneuvered the arm, guiding Olivia into the retrieval capsule. The second she was inside, he sealed it. "Hang on," he muttered. He hit the emergency ascent. The sub lurched, the thrusters roared. They were going up, fast. But then, the signal returned. The voice came again. Through the walls, through the steel, through Mercer's skull. Too late. The sub stopped. Not by command, not by failure. Something had grabbed them. Mercer's stomach twisted. He tried to override the controls. Nothing. The sonar screen flickered, a shape unfolded in the darkness. And for the first time, he saw it. The thing in the deep. It wasn't a creature. Not like anything in nature. It was older than that. The bones of the ocean itself. A thing of stone and hunger and thousands of eyes that had never seen the sun. Mercer's throat went dry. The lights on the sub flickered, and in the dim glow, it looked at him and smiled. The Trident crew was screaming over the radio. "Mercer, get out of there!" Samantha's voice cut through the static. "We're pulling you up, hold on." The winch engaged, the sub jerked upward. The thing in the dark moved, and for a second, Mercer swore he saw something else. Something behind it, something deeper, something worse. The sub broke free. The ascent was violent, rapid. Mercer gritted his teeth as the pressure shift sent a wave of nausea through his gut. The lights flickered, and then they broke the surface. The bathysphere Vive was pulled onto the deck. The second the hatch opened, Mercer stumbled out, gasping. The crew rushed forward. Samantha was there, Lyle, others. But Mercer wasn't looking at them. He was looking at Olivia, still strapped in the retrieval capsule, still pale, and still staring. Her lips moved. She whispered something. Mercer leaned in, and what she said froze his blood. "You should not have brought me back." Some calls from the deep should never be answered. But even after the Trident's crew made it back, one of them carried something with her. Something that never truly left. Because the ocean doesn't always take, it lets you go just to see if you'll come back. And Dr. Olivia Harding, she never really left at all. The ocean does not forget. It does not forgive. It waits. And when it calls you back, you have no choice but to listen. Dr. Olivia Harding should not be alive. She knew that. The last thing she remembered before the narrate went dark was the sound of cracking metal, the cold rush of water, the abyss swallowing her whole. She should have drowned. She should be dead. But instead, she was here, alive, and something was very, very wrong. Olivia sat on the edge of the Trident's medical bay. She was wrapped in blankets, dry, warm, but she didn't feel human. Her skin felt wrong, too smooth, too sensitive, like something had grown over her, something that wasn't hers. She stared at her hands. Her nails had turned pale, her fingertips pruned like she had spent days underwater. Had she? No, that wasn't possible. But then again, nothing about this was possible. Samantha was standing across from her, watching. Not just as a doctor, as a scientist looking at something that should not exist. "Olivia," she said. Her voice was calm, measured, but Olivia could hear it beneath the surface. The fear. "Tell me what happened down there." Olivia tried to answer, tried to find the words, but there were no words for what she had seen, no words for what had spoken to her. Instead, she whispered something else, something that came from a part of her mind she didn't recognize. "It let me go." Samantha frowned. "It? What do you mean?" Then the alarm sounded, loud, violent, the kind of alarm that only meant one thing: something was coming. Mercer's voice crackled over the radio. "Sonar just picked up movement below us, something big." Samantha paled. "How big?" The silence that followed told her everything. Then Mercer's voice again, tighter. "It's the same thing that grabbed the sub." The ship rocked. Something had touched it. Not a wave, not the current. Something else, something alive. The crew rushed to stations, checking sonar, activating floodlights, preparing for something they didn't understand. And Olivia, she heard it. Not with her ears, with something deeper, a voice in the pit of her mind, a voice she had heard before, a voice that had kept her alive. Come back. Olivia's breath hitched. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. It was calling her. And worst of all, she wanted to answer. Her body moved before she could stop it. She stood. Samantha grabbed her arm. Olivia, wait. But it was too late. Olivia's feet carried her forward, toward the deck, toward the water. She felt it before she even saw it. The pull, the weight, like something in the ocean had reached up and wrapped itself around her soul. The Trident crew shouted, people ran, but Olivia, she only heard the ocean, the way it whispered, the way it welcomed her home. And then she jumped. The water swallowed her whole, cold, endless. But she did not panic, she did not fight, because this was where she belonged. Her lungs should have burned, but they didn't. She should have felt pain, but she didn't. Instead, she breathed. She opened her eyes, and there, it waited. The thing from the wreckage, the thing that had saved her, or had it? Maybe it had simply kept her, waiting for her to return. It moved, not like a predator, not like a monster, like something patient, like something that had done this before, hundreds of times. Thousands. Olivia drifted closer. She should have been afraid, but she wasn't, because deep inside, she knew the truth. She had never escaped. She had never been rescued. She had always been here, above the surface. The crew of the Trident watched in horror. Samantha screamed her name. Mercer grabbed a rope. He dove after her. But by the time he hit the water, she was already gone. The sonar buzzed. A single signal, something moving away, deeper, and with it, a final whisper crackling over the radio. A voice that was not Olivia's anymore. I was never meant to leave. Olivia was lost, but was she ever really human when she returned? The ocean doesn't just change those who enter it, it changes the world around them. And sometimes when you listen closely enough, it isn't just whispers in the dark. It's something vast, something waiting, something older than time itself. If you enjoyed this dive into the unknown, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We have more terrifying tales from the deep coming your way. And remember, sometimes it's not what you see in the ocean that should scare you. It's what sees you. Stay safe and keep listening.